name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Hello, brothers and sisters in Christ. Welcome back to another episode of the Dekiga's Eon BookCast. I am joined here today with my sisters Meret and Kadis to discuss our fourth book called To Become One by Father Antonios and Irene. So, to preface, this book was written by a Coptic parish priest and a Coptic counselor who both work with families and groups addressing a range of issues, and they have experience facilitating parenting and relationship seminars to help couples and families establish and maintain healthy relationships. So, they wrote this book as an Orthodox Christian guide to engagement and marriage. So, we are now going to introduce ourselves and then dive into this bookcast. I'll start. My name is Tiovista. I am currently engaged to be married. My sisters can continue.
Oh, my name is Mehret, and I am married. Been married for almost 2 years. Will be 2 years in September, and we have one baby girl together.
My name is Kaldas. Same, I'll be married almost 2 years in August. And we have a son together.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for the introduction. So the importance of that was just to show where we are in different stages of our lives, and also so that the audience is aware of the type of perspectives that we will be giving. So I'm going to just give a little preface about the introduction chapter of the book. So they discuss the state of modern marriage. They talk about how marriage rates are declining, and as well as religious wedding ceremonies are also declining. And they said that this reflects the societal shift towards individualism and away from the sacred view of marriage, which was really important. And that many people are marrying with little understanding of the deeper meaning of marriage, which causes harm intentionally both for the person and their partner. So they describe that the purpose of this book is aimed at couples preparing for marriage, but it can also be useful for those who are already married. It also offers wisdom to help couples who to build a strong and lasting relationship. And it also seeks to reduce unnecessary suffering in marriages by providing spiritual and emotional guidance. So, one of my favorite things that they describe, so in the title of the book, we know that it's To Become One. So, they describe the Christian marriage as a riddle of life. So, when one becomes two, they describe is when a lonely person seeks love and companionship. And then when two become one, the bond of Christian marriage is sanctified through the Holy Spirit. And then one becomes two. So through the sacrificial love, the couple gives life to children. And then from two comes one. Children become independent and seek love themselves. And then we begin again. And they describe this cycle of divine love to repeat, reflecting God's nature. They also describe that the holistic Orthodox approach is that true Christian love involves humility, self-sacrifice, and unconditional giving. And that psychology also supports that healthy marriages stem from secure early relationships and emotional awareness. And overall, this book integrates theological, medical, psychological, and social insights rooted in Orthodox tradition. So now we can dive into the discussion. The floor is open for you guys to bring up any topic that you guys were interested in to start this discussion.
Your main point was the one becomes two, two becomes one. I did that was one of your interesting ones. Do you have another major point that you want to bring up before we take the floor?
Nope.
Meret, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think I'll start because I think the point that really caught my heart was right at the beginning of the book. It was, I think, in the introduction, and it was talking about attachment style, and it really just kind of opened up a new door for me to look at things because it's just something that I've been thinking about attachment style. It's it's a psychology term that's used to just that's used to describe how people act, I think, in relationship, and it's formed in your childhood, and also having like a small baby. I read a lot about attachment styles and how what I do can influence her, which will largely influence how she'll act and how she'll be in the world later on. So it's something that's in my mind a lot. And then seeing that at the beginning of the book kind of jumped out at me, especially because it was something that I hadn't thought of, but that just like made a lot of sense in a way. I've had this thought in my head, but I didn't know it could be said that way. And it's in page 11. So I'm just gonna read it. It says, so psychology has taught us that the most influential factors that shape adult relationships begin in childhood. By and large, those who formed healthy, secure relationships in their childhood are those who are most likely to form healthy, secure relationships as adults. And it says, so for Christians, the foundational, securely attached relationship is the one we have with Christ. So I thought that was kind of really eye-opening because um, a lot of the things that we do, the actions that we take, how we perceive things, I think that stems from how our attachment is with Christ. And if our attachment is secure and that we rely on Christ and that we are always viewing things from with a Christian lens and our relationship with God, our relationship with Christ is solid. If we're living a sacramental life, then everything else like will be answered. It's not gonna be hard. And then the relationship that we have with our partner, with our kids, with our friends, it will be steered in a positive direction if the relationship that we have Christ is what anchors it and what the foundation is for our life. So that was really interesting, and that was the approach that I went into the book, and they keep kind of coming back to that even though they weren't calling it as attachment style, but they did say, like, especially at the beginning, they were talking about like um the let me go back to the quote. I think it's on page 23. I saved it. On page 24, it says, this persistence itself is a sign not only for your love for your future spouse, but also of your love for your eternal God, and even in a way for yourself. These changes make you a better Christian and a better human being. And it's talking about how I think this is in the like chapter one, in the marriage ability and finding the one. They insist that you look inwards and try to make yourself a better Christian, but not only in finding the one, but also in marriage, you're always striving to be better, to serve the other, to make the other one come out first and lessen yourself in a way, in a secure, in a healthy way. And I think you can only do that if you have a healthy relationship and a secure attachment style with Christ. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was really what made sense to me and a big takeaway for me.
That when you said something about making the other first, I think when we were in youth group, when we were talking about relationships, there was something that Cassie said that always like sticks in my head, and it's a marriage is when two people are bracing for the other to be first, right? So like it's not you're not trying to be first, you want the other one to be first, but you're fighting the other to make the other one first. So it's like it's a struggle. You're fighting against your own passions, you're fighting against a lot of things that happen in the world. Like even when you said like putting the other first, you had to say in a healthy way because now we live in a world where if we say putting the others first and lessening yourself is considered a bad thing.
Right,
So we
yeah.
have to like explain like no, we mean that and like like we have to explain that like in a self-sacrificial way that Christ did and like humility I'm not being trampled by but like we have to explain all of that, right?
Yeah.
But I always remember that and yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said that because they mentioned that in the book too. They're
Yeah.
saying like submitting is like considered a dirty word now, like
Yeah.
in today's society to say I'm gonna send myself to my husband. You're gonna have to do a lot of explaining to say
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
afterwards. So I think it just teaches you how far apart the worldview and the Christian Orthodox view of marriage and relationship is. And
Yeah.
it's one of the ways that become like very apparent how different things are, or how different perspectives are from like worldview versus Orthodox Christian view is it really shows in relationships.
Yeah.
Was really shocking. Even someone who isn't married yet, but getting closer to marriage, I had to really reflect on, am I marriageable? Because why was it in the first chapter? I mean, I obviously knew it, but just reading it again, not once did it say, what is your partner giving to you? Like, they should have this, this, and this before you get married. The whole first chapter was, why does your partner need to marry you? And that was a little bit of a shock factor. And also how in every single way of life in modern society, whether it's books, whether it's movies, music, everything around us promotes, my partner has to give to me, that idea of individualism, and nothing about self-sacrifice. So the fact that the book, I mean, as a whole, hardly emphasizes, I mean, they talk about compatibility, obviously, but it's always like you have to give. How much can you give? Or you're preparing yourself to give, not to receive. So that was honestly a huge lesson, a really important lesson.
I think there's one part about it that Mirat said, like, it's the worldview, right? Is it, if you're coming at this from the point of view of, I'm a Christian, like, I was created in the image of God, and my end goal is to live with Christ in eternity, right? And to do what I have done, to do what Christ wanted me to do in this world, and then to live with him in the other world, right? So like in eternity. So we are not bound by this world and our selfish passions here. So because of that, like that's that whole, even tinsayamutan and mamen rasu, like that shifts everything, right? Even thinking about that, because I'm not gonna get stuck here. And all of those things, the selfish passions, all of that, they're out, right? So yeah, and no, there was something that they said. I highlighted this whole paragraph, but it was about but it was about having this kind of what I'm talking about now, a God-centered view versus a self-centered view. And I think that's a huge difference. And it says, but God is everywhere, and we are happiest when we involve him in every aspect of our lives. He's waiting for you in the aisle of the supermarket, in the traffic jam on the highway, and at the baby changing table at 3 a.m. on a cold winter's morning. He is there not only before the altar on your wedding day, but also in the reception hall afterward and in the bedroom after that. Everything we do in our lives is meant to be sacred, to be shared with him, sanctified by him, from the smallest detail to the most momentous and life-changing decision. He is sharing with your life. He's sharing your life from the moment you're conceived until the moment you die and beyond. So that's how it starts it, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, if you don't have that point of view, then none of this makes sense, or you can always have an argument against it if you're not going into this with this sort of mindset.
Yeah.
Mm, I think that was kind of my next point was my biggest point was that not just in marriage and in relationships, again, but as a Christian, everything permeates that way, right? Being God-centered, being versus being self-centered. And I think the time that we're in now is a really good example of how we kind of see how far being self-centered and self-focused goes, right? Especially in the country that we live in. To the point where like the most basic of things, like who you are and who God created you to be, like your gender, people now deny that, like the most basic of basic things, because who are we thinking about? Not even the self, but like the feeling.
Yeah.
The most fleeting part and the most um, fickle part of ourselves is our feelings, right? Not even just our feelings and how we feel about something and how that's shaped. And that changes, but that's such a um self-centeredness, but then look like how far it can go, it shows us. And
Yeah.
then you can kind of take that and imagine how far Christ wants us to go in the other direction,
Mhm.
right? So I thought that was one of my the fact that they emphasized that at the very beginning, being God-centered versus being self-centered. I thought that was a really good point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the norm in our society to compartmentalize every different like aspect of our lives. I see a lot of posts that promote like wholesomeness, but it's not like it's like a checklist. Oh, girl, you're going to your gym, praying, and you're saving your money. Like you're so it's like okay, you got like it's like a check. Like I'm good here because I'm praying every night. Like that part is like taken care of. And I'm saving my money here, so financially I'm good. And I'm going to the gym, so like physically I'm great. And so like we have like a lot of like, and then like, oh, on Sunday, going to church, this and this. And then what about Monday through Saturday? Oh, Monday through Friday, that's like that's work, that's corporate. And then Saturday is like social life. It's so easy for us to live like that, I think, because the world operates in that way. But I think as Christians, it could be very dangerous to think like that and not to put Christ in the center, or like if we're having like a diagram, it would just be like one huge circle of like Christ, we're in it, and all the other circles just have to be within that, like whether it's financial, physical, whatever it is, they're all inside. It's not a Venn diagram, it's not like they're all inside, and everything exists in that world where Christ is at the center and where we are Christians, even if we're going to the gym, whether we're going to work, like you said, like it's inside of that. Like you cannot say, or it can be very dangerous to think that. I think
Mm.
that's because even in relationships, like it's and it's confusing to see because even like people that go to church or like they're your friends with church, when it comes to a relationship, it's because the world just such pushes such a huge agenda on, I think, breaking apart families and breaking apart like relationships. It doesn't thrive on good relationships. So it's always promoting the other. So it's easy to find yourself thinking that way without even like thinking about it, that like that where it's coming from that. You know, it's always like, oh, what did he do for me? Or what did he do for you? Oh, he didn't do this for you. Especially like for
Yeah.
girls, I think. Like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
dump it. Like, yeah, it's just so easy. Like to just
Red flag. Red flag.
yeah, red
Yeah.
flag immediately. So yeah, I think if we have that mindset, we need to bring that mindset, and think like Tio was saying, like, oh, okay, what did I do? Um, yeah.
It makes me really sad because um, at the foundation of it, what this book was really talking about was just how much we need to improve on loving one another, including our spouse. And in the chapter, I think it was like chapter 3, when it talked about like what is Christian marriage, it talked about how loving your spouse means by giving yourself, and just by giving yourself, you become more like the true and faithful image of God. Like, who would have known? I mean, I definitely think this is something Satan tries to cover within the world by getting people in relationships to think more about themselves than their partner. And then that creates more breakups, more divorces. And so, just by loving, you can be more like the image of God. So, that was something that really, I felt like personally I had to improve a lot on and learn more about what does it mean. There's simple, there's still limitations of how. I mean, it isn't until you talk to your confession father that you really know what it means to give yourself. It's like you don't even think about yourself. What a true Christian is, you don't even think about yourself. You don't think, oh, that scoring game where, okay, if he does the dishes, I'll, compliment him or something. Um, it's nothing like that. That's not what Christian marriage is. You literally have to give yourself. And I feel like if this was advertised more, it would be harder, a lot harder for people to be quickly to, get married. So that was really interesting to learn about and also explore as well. Um, and yeah, and another part of it that I really loved was how it talked about the more love you give away, the more of it you have in yourself. And it said that that was the nature of love. It multiplies as it passes from one to another. This is literally the opposite of what modern society is teaching. It's saying you have to grab from everybody, and then that's how you like fill up your love. Or the other side is individualism. You take care of yourself. That's how you get love. It's literally not that. It's you have to give love in order to receive love.
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
Yeah, I wrote down like a quote from page 38, and it was again like another like mind shifting thing to understand. Was it said marriage is about practicing Christ-like love. And as Christians, before we come into marriage, um we're practicing, like you hear about it, you learn about it in different sermons, like, okay, you have to be patient, you have to be giving, you have to be kind, you have to return, hostility with calmness, and all these like spirit, the fruit of the spirit that we learn. And I feel like if people that are watching this, they're not in a relationship yet, you should really hone in on that and practice that with friends. It's a lot easier when you're like coming across it, like, every few weeks, every like you have a lot of time to like calm yourself, like prepare yourself for that. Because once you're in your marriage, like you're living with that person or even with a relationship, and different things, different like obstacles are bound to come every week. And when you're living with someone, it could be every day. And if you have not practiced that with your friends or with your family, that could be that could be hard to just be thrown into that. And reading that, like, oh, marriage is about practicing Christ-like love. Everything that we've read, in the Bible, all the sermons that we've heard, it's been like preparing us that way. But again, like the world is not promoting that. It's about 50-50. What is he giving me? What's she bringing to the table, you know? Um, and it was actually funny because I just heard a phrase recently when speaking with a friend, and it was something like a concept of like, oh, "Is ka batal," or like let's take a bish billeno. I was like, what does that mean? And he was explaining like, like in a marriage, like let's say one spouse really tries and tries and the other spouse is not changing and they're like not good, but the other person will continue anyway saying, okay, let's deck up butts. I'll become holy. And I was like, but how? And they're like, oh, because they're like being patient. When the other person is like, spewing bad words and the other's like, he's being like patient or whatever, he's like accumulating virtues and becoming holy. He's moving towards holiness. And I was like, oh wow, like I've never heard of that here. It's you don't like that point of view is thinking of it, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to take advantage of this spiritually and become holy. Versus here, when like it's not working out, it's like they're strategizing divorce moves and like, ooh,
Hmm.
what can I take? Like, am I gonna get the house? Am I gonna get and like the lengths that people go in divorce hearings, it's mind-boggling to see the different opposite sides. And it's just a matter of perspective and how you view marriage. Um, so I thought that was really interesting with what you said, yeah.
I think anyone say let's talk about Miron. I think initially before like I knew who I was gonna marry and all of that, I used to watch a lot of like teachings and read a lot of books about marriage and like what the church fathers said and what like current fathers were saying, Coptic, Ethiopia, like but I'm not, but I had a whole like playlist that had like so many videos on it, and I really listened to a lot. Um, at one point I had to stop because like I need to do other things, but like you reach a point in your life like
Yeah.
where that kind of consumes you, right? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people right now who may not be in a relationship or who are seeking to be in a relationship where you have internal asks for wanting to be in a relationship, external, like people saying, oh, when are you getting married or when you're going to be. So, like, it just comes to a point where you really are seeking that. So, in that time, I listened to a lot of things, I read a lot of things. And now that was one of the things that I remember thinking about was, I don't know, for some reason, I prepared myself for saying like, okay, because a lot of what I learned, they were talking about examples of current, like people currently who are married, and also like of wives and husbands, like saints who have passed, about how they had a really tough marriage, but how one of them like persevered to change the other person, or one of them, the other person didn't change, but that one person that persevered became holy as a result of it. So I had a lot, so my mind consumed a lot of that. So in my head, I think that helped me fight the idea of like, I'm gonna go into marriage and then I'm gonna have this and then I'm gonna have that and then he has to do this. Like I would always tell myself like even if it as long as it's the እግዚአብሔር ፈቃድ እስከሆነ ድረስ, even if I struggle, like it's okay because in it my relationship is with God first and then this person is just an added bonus. Whether it's an added good bonus or an added, like I'm saying, before I got married, that was my thought process, right? And now people are always like, why are you thinking for the worst or preparing for, but it's not really the worst. It's just,
Yeah.
and there was one father that was talking about patience is like a way of carrying suffering and evil. And so that not only brings you closer to Christ, but it makes you more like Christ, right? Because who suffered more than he did? So you always have someone in your corner,
Yeah.
right? Like you're never alone. Um, and no, so I always, so that kind of thing, and I bring this up to say, like reading church, like books like this, other books that are written by other fathers, listening to sermons like this helps prepare you in a lot of ways. Like, so that andenya, it helps fight the kind of wrong assumptions that you might have about marriage that are too on the fairy tale side. But then it also helps you prepare on design and I go, okay, this is like training ground, right? Like this is the best place to practice the fruits of the spirit because it's always available. Like your friends are not always available. You mentioned that at work, you leave them, it's 9 to 5 or whatever, and you're home. You don't need to be with your coworkers the whole day. But with your husband or with your wife, it's always. So የእግዚአብሔርን ፍቅርም, it's like a way of seeing God's love too on the flip side and the good side too. So yeah, it is በጣም ጥሩ point ነው. There was one thing that um and I don't want to take this to the um maybe more on the criticism side and put some things that I was a little bit worried about in the book. But just so that we can address everything, there was a point where they mentioned something and I put so many question marks on it. But hold on, I'm just trying to find it. It was talking about engagement. And it talks about a couple things. And one of the things, there's one point, I think it's on 35. It says some couples, talking about the engagement, some couples like to involve their spiritual fathers through confession or counseling to help them to be accountable for maintaining reasonable limits of physical interaction with one another during the period of engagement. This kind of accountability can be very effective in keeping you in the right path. And my note on that is this is the only way. This is the only right way. Like this is not like I just I just want to bold, underline, highlight that statement. This is not like the way that this was presented as if like this is a really good option. Like if you want to involve your spiritual father and then have someone help you with physical interaction or lack thereof in the engagement period before you get married, this is the way. This is the right way. This is the only way. It does not work without it. And an example that I can give for that, or like a biblical thing for that, is in one gate when it talks about the house that's built on a rock and the house that's built on sand. If you read the andimta for that, it has, or the interpretation for that, it has the commentary. It has a lot of different things that it comments on. But one of the things that it says is the house that's built on a rock, that person is someone who lives on the foundation of mikrakahin, or the advice of his confession father or priest, and the person that who built his house on sand is the person who doesn't live under mikrakahin or under the advice and watch of his confession father, right? So I think that's like, I mean, it's the comparison of building your house on rock and sand. So it's not, I don't think it's an optional thing, especially for engagement. That's like two people who love each other. You need the guidance and the filter and the sound mind, the spiritual guidance of your spiritual father to help guide you when arguments come, when you stumble, to help keep you on the straight path so that you're not getting into. And they talk a lot about how like premarital sex and like other sorts of acts, like sexual acts before marriage, is inappropriate. And you cannot fight that by yourself. Or you can't, you two people who, and I remember I was in a youth group where they were telling me like, but he's like my brother. It's okay. And I was like, let me explain. It's like a group of, I was talking to a group of high schoolers, and they were like, but like if he's like a brother, we're just talking about even being in close proximity with like the other sex and just having too much like physical closeness and what that could lead to. And they were like, I was like, you will not know yourself when you're in that, like right now, you're a rational thinking human being. But when you're in that stage, especially if it's someone you love, someone you've committed to being married to, it's it's not an easy temptation. So you need the guidance of confession father for that. So I thought that part I had a sort of a question mark on when I read that.
Yeah, I remember Cecilia saying that so many times, beating us to it, like in youth group, saying it's a fire, you're in a ring and there's fire, and you're saying, I'm gonna leave, like I'm gonna cross the ring and go out like untouched or unscathed. Like it's not happening. So it would be like, but if it's like it's a fire and like, are you gonna have like some smoke? Yes. So then like so you put that picture in my head so much. So like literally, like literally what I picture is a ring like and fire. So like you cannot convince me that it's not like that there's room for error. There isn't. And
Yeah.
speaking from experience too, it's just yeah, don't trust yourself with that. And again, he always said that too, like asfito matter when it comes to physical intimacy.
Hmm.
As far as your eye can see, how do you say that in English, I
Yeah.
guess? To
Mhm.
build a fence as like that's
The boundary as far as possible.
as
Yeah.
like the make the boundary as far back as you can. Yeah. And when it comes to physical intimacy, pre-marriage, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry, there's one, it's kind of similar, but the aim point, how fast should the physical relationship progress? It says every couple is different, but the general principle that physical intimacy should progress at a rate that is comfortable for both partners. I wholly disagree with this. Like, because what if both partners feel comfortable that premarital sex is okay? So then that makes it like, you see, this in itself is not a God-centered view,
Mhm.
right? Like to say that this is a decision that they make, especially when it's physical intimacy, it gives too much power, and like it thinks that those two in that state are going to make the right decision here. And it's not. It says like err on the side of safety, but like it just what she said, the only way, the right way, the safest way is arokomater, not to leave it up to the decision for the two people that love each other very much. Like it doesn't, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just to like say a funny example, I remember when my now husband, when he'd already sent Shemagale, and I think this was like a month before we got married, and we were leaving church, and there was a almost that needed a ride, and and he was giving me a ride home, so we was like, oh okay, they sat in the front, I was in the back, and then as we're dropping them off, they were asking him, "Oh, you're about to get married?" And he was like, "Yeah, she's like, and that like that's her." And they were so shocked. They're like, "Ay, ya katama? This is like you're in the same car?" And we were like, we're about to get married. Like, do you know how conservative like that we are? Like,
In our eyes.
I know in our eyes we've done like the most like strangest things, like to make sure that like we have the boundaries, the lengths that we went. But for them, and we're like, no, we're like, no, we're getting married in a month, but they're just like, so that's yeah. So just a bit of like a culture shock. Is it a cul? I don't know if it's just a culture, but I think they have a reason to be. There's a reason why they're worried. Like it's not for no. It's just it's yeah. There's a reason.
Yeah. Oh, anything you want to add on this? I feel like we took a lot of it too.
No, I mean, you guys unpacked so you can.
Feel the heat of it.
I'm going through it right now. Yeah, they were not lying when they said it's Saturday. Like you feel fire. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how you can feel fire, but you feel it's hot. So
Yeah.
um yeah, always include your confession father from the beginning. Even I think even more through the engagement period. I know it's very scary, like you want to keep things to yourself, or
Yeah.
some will say too much. You kind of have to have like a balance. You have to know yourself as well if you're going to have a lot more trouble. Being honest with your confession father, especially what you're going through, will help a lot. I think in my experience, you know, I think the biggest thing I would advise people that are, engaged or getting engaged is to always talk to your confession father and take Holy Communion frequently. I think that personally saved us a lot of um, challenges because you know what you're getting yourself into. Like engagement period was not fun at all for me because I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew we whatever happened during the relationship part, it's going to be multiplied times 10. So I was prepared for that, and I think a lot of what modern society is showing, especially on social media, is having fun during this period. Going out to trips, going out to vacations, spending a lot of time with each other. Not saying that you shouldn't, because I know it's still very difficult. You're in your during that period, you're very, very close to that person, but you should be holding on to God as close to, because um, there are many, many trials that will come for every single one of us, personally speaking. And not, yeah, it's not a joke, the engagement period. It did talk about how in this book it said a period about finding out whether two people are suitable to marry one another, which is true. And then it also says breaking an engagement simply means that the couple has discovered that they are not suitable for each other, which is also true. That should happen in the engagement period rather than, in the marriage period. And then it goes a little bit more about like how engagements best work. I think it's a little bit different in our culture, especially because you're not really considered engaged until you send shimgalina. And it's actually different. And I wanted to talk about that because I know it's a little bit confusing for um, I mean, I was born and raised here, so I'm kind of like, which tradition do we do? But he was born there, so we did it more traditionally. So there's this tradition of people getting engaged before the Shimgalina, and then there's a tradition of people getting engaged after the Shimgalina, people not getting engaged at all, and just doing the Shimgalina. And then for us, I know traditionally, once the Shimgalina is sent, it's really hard because that's when you get family involved and you're like, oh, we're ready to marry. It's not even like, oh, nitayay. Because in Ethiopia, I remember I had a friend at church who had just heard about, Shimgalina being sent, and then she asked me, "Oh, is the wedding a month from now?" I was like, "What do you mean? It's a year." She was like, "What? Like we do?" She was very baffled because she was like, "Shimganana is normally done like a month or two before the wedding." So that was really interesting to learn about because one, it's a lot quicker preparation there. Um, and some families do the preparation before the shimgalana. Like there's just different things. So um I wanted to kind of like bring up the question, like, what do you guys think the engagement period that this or this book talked about? Do you think it would pertain to our culture, or do you guys think no, the engagement period is a little bit different in our culture and religion, obviously?
You want me to do?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before, just to give us both time to think, can you explain to everyone what Shumgalana means?
Yes. So Shimgalana is the tradition that, and it is both biblical, religious, and traditional, where a family from the male side, he sends, biblically, they say three. Three is more than enough.
Mm.
People do more. People, I mean, it shouldn't be less, but people do more. That is up to them. But you need minimum of three. And these are either witnesses, family members that will go and ask for the lady's hand in marriage. These three men will either come bearing gifts, which that's also the tradition that they're supposed to come bearing gifts. Um, in Ethiopia, what happens is it's first they send somebody saying we're gonna send Shimgadana, or we're gonna send people, be prepared, to the females or the lady's house, and then um, they can either say no or yes. And then if they say yes, then he goes back. Then a couple days or a week later, then they send the shimgalana. And normally, the woman's family will either prepare a feast. Well, actually, it's a little bit different because sometimes they do it after. But from what my experience was, is they'll prepare a feast and then they'll have the shimmagalioch stand there, ask for the woman's hand in marriage. Her family members will be also gathered around at her house. Both the bride and groom are not going to be there. And yeah, and then if the family says yes, then the shemagalochika met alu and they eat together. And then that's when the wedding preparations start. Um, and here, I mean, it's been frankly around the same thing. Like we don't do the sending one person first saying, "Oh, shemagalili lak." No, it's normally like the family knows ahead of time. um, for like distance reasons. So yeah, that's what shemgalina is.
Thank you for that was very good explanation.
Thorough
Thank you.
explanation.
I know, I'm on the spot too. It's funny, I was just listening to um Patanagast Andamta by Ligalikant
Mm.
Kana, and they were asked the same like question, how long should an engagement period be? I don't think there is like a definite number written. I don't think so. But they were saying like you wouldn't buy a house and like not live in it, or like you wouldn't just keep it like unvacated or vacated. So they were saying it um it shouldn't be too long. Like, again, he was saying like I've heard of engagements lasting like 5, 7 years, but how much like how unburnt are you when you're coming out of that fire? Because it is like a fire. Like it doesn't matter how strong you are. It just doesn't help. It doesn't help you to make it really long, and it doesn't help for it to be like literally really short, especially at this day and age. Of course, our forefathers and mothers got married without even looking at each other, but the level of faith that they have and the culture, the societal norms that they experienced is different, and it's hard to say, oh, that shouldn't affect us, we can do it too. It's just we're not as strong. So um I think SCCA recommends like between 1 year to 3 years, I would say, or like 2 years is a good period to get to know one another and to decide. As far as the Shimguna goes, I know like in Ethiopia or especially in the countryside, it's it really determines whether you get married or not. They could really say no. I don't know about it now though, because usually the parents already know, and I don't know how willing the bride and groom are to to hear a rejection and go through with it. So again, the level of our faith has gone down since this tradition has started. So that's yeah, I would say again, like sorry, not me. Who cares what I think? But what I've heard, what I've heard, what like that the church promotes is again not too short, not too long. Of course, there are extraneous circumstances, hence why you should be talking to a confession father. Like it could be 40 years if it's a confession father like approved and like every situation is different. But generally speaking, it shouldn't be too long, it shouldn't be too short. Yeah. But stay.
And my add to that is just about like the engagement, how it's different. I did know your question of how it's different from the way it's presented in this book and how it is kind of in our faith and tradition. Like we have the same faith because they're both Coptic Orthodox writers. One is a priest, one is a counselor. Um, but I think the roots of like the background from which we came really affects it a lot. Like this is like the Shrimgadana tradition is comes from the Old Testament. So like that's I think the biggest difference we have is we came from the like our faith now it's heavily influenced by the Old Testament. We kind of brought that with us. So there's that. And I think the way that this book presents things is and it presents things in a way that like a mind that's been shaped by, or at least influenced by modern thinking can kind of, it's palatable, for a mind and someone who's born here or even if in Ethiopia, because like even a lot of the times in Ethiopia, like contemporary culture is moving towards kind of Western thing too. So that kind of mindset, it's palatable to that. But there's also things that we have that on, for example, like one of the things that helped me was in Fitanagas, one of the things that I remember reading, and I think it was either ትንሿ ቤተክርስቲያን that was written by ገብረ እግዚአብሔር ኪደ, or it's like Orthodox ቤተሰብ, also written by ገብረ እግዚአብሔር ኪደ. There's something in there, there's one line in there that I remember, and it was like in Fitanagas it says how you know like that relationship is right. And like that kind of thing, I really think speaks to us, like numbers and lists and like these are the five things that like that kind of thing. Really, I think we're shaped in that way. So that I remember having something like that from an EOTC point was like gold for me. And it was like in Leftonagus it says if three parties agree, and these three parties are the two of them, both parents, and both confession fathers. If these three agree, then that's one of the ways that you can ascertain that that's God will. It has a caveat though. If one of those six parties disagrees, but on the basis of like a faulty reasoning, for example, because I like the mom of someone disagrees because he's poor or like he's from a different race or something like that, that's not like, you know what I'm saying? Like he's like tribal or whatever, that doesn't then like negate it from being God's will, right? Because that person is not thinking in accordance with God's will. But if someone is like like really like raising a like a red flag that's in according with God's will, it's like, and it says that was one of the things that was in here too. Kind of didn't mention it exactly in that way, but it mentioned like really take wise counsel, and people who have your best interest at heart and also like spiritually strong within themselves under your confession father too. Definitely confession father, that's a must. But that kind of thing helps. So I think there's things in here that we can use to help guide us, but we also have like from our traditions like things that we can use and take up space. I feel like I'm finishing this off with another criticism and I don't want to. But I think like just to another point, and I loved this book. I really did. And especially because it started out with having like a God-centered mindset. And also it explained a lot of the things, like not even just for myself, but a lot of these things I can explain to others and I can use it to kind of describe and explain a lot of the Christian worldview to others. But there's some certain things in there again that I think we always have to make sure. One of the reasons is that we have to read sources from our own church and also have a strong relationship with our confession father so that we can filter the things that we take in, even when it's from other churches. Um, is the I think it talks about contraception. This is towards the end, and it mentions um the types of contraception that's allowed and the type that isn't allowed. And I could be wrong, but me personally, but from what I've heard from like one of the most prominent teachers currently in our church, who's Appa that like the mindset they're coming from, thinking of it as like we have to also consider overpopulation. They mentioned that, and they mentioned certain types of contraception being allowed in that way for that reason and for many other reasons. But I don't, that's from what I understand, that's not our church's view. Like, I don't know if there's a new discussion within the Synod that I am not aware of that is going to be that Kwame Synodos is like discussing. But from what I've heard from Memheran, most recent thing that I've heard, that's not our church's view of, I don't think any sort of contraception is allowed, but everything again is you discuss with your confession father. So what happens between a couple and their confession father, that's there. And I always use this example of like the FDA has 2,000 calories is good for a normal person. And that's like the public health, the USDA public health guidelines, right? But you could be overweight. So like if you discuss with your primary care doctor could say, no, you need to eat, or your nutritionist could say, no, you need to eat 1,800 calories. So like there's general guidelines and there's general guidelines, and then there's always, always, always what you do in your life is always kazan, it's with your confession father. So I'm not negating that at all. But the church's view, and I think I'm thankful that they mentioned that. They kind of there's like one sentence in there that's like there's still Orthodox churches that have a more conservative view, or so I think they kind of
Yeah.
touched a little bit. Um, but yeah, that's not our background. But yeah, that's just the only thing that I thought was a caveat, something that we don't agree with that.
Yeah. I think there's nothing to add there because you said it all. That was one big like flag for me too, both that and the data part of it, the intimacy part. I did have like one last point, which was I really liked what they said about unity, and which is also why I would really recommend this book to
Mm,
not just people, because it says like it's a guide to engagement and marriage. So some like people may think, oh, I got married like 5, 10 years ago, but I think it's really useful because like towards the end about our it talks about the unity of marriage, how Tio mentioned I think to become one about in the introduction,
mm,
and they cited really good points on how to maintain a very good relationship or a good marriage, and the three things that really I think like are like yeah, those are really, really good things that I want to implement in my marriage. We're still new, so we can still shape it this way. One of them was like communication, and a lot of the examples that they were mentioning, I could be like, oh yeah, I remember this happening like in our marriage. Oh yeah, this like it was. They were really spot on. And one of the things they mentioned, of course, was the gender differences. I know we didn't talk a lot about that, but um it wasn't until I got into like this relationship that I learned that men and women are different. Especially because like like we keep saying, just the society that we live in does not like to say that.
mm,
Um and it makes you believe that because there is a lot of propaganda for that. You just don't realize it until like you have to face it. And yeah, so there are really good notes about that. And about communication, I really like the points there as well. And they mentioned the importance of intentions. And I think, hold on, let me see if I had that flagged. It was on page 111 or 112. And it talks about how when you're living in this marriage lifestyle, because you know the person, you start to assume things about that person, when they say things or when they do things. It's not like when you're just getting to know each other, or where you're more likely to ask, why did you say this? Or where you're more curious to find out. When you live together a little bit, or when you're in the relationship, even once you've gotten, like, once that discovery phase has kind of ended, I think we sometimes, especially I think like as women too, we tend to jump to conclusions or say like, oh, this is why he did this, or this is why he did this because he must not care about me. And one of the things that so they say on page 112 is, so unfortunately, our assumptions become self-fulfilling prophecies. We start to find evidence that our beliefs are true. We stop asking what the other person means when he says something unexpected, and instead interpret his words and behavior according to our own, often mistaken assumptions about his intentions. When this occurs over a prolonged period of time in a marriage, it can start to erode the relationship and leave each partner believing that the other does not love or care about him or her. Um, their conceptions of their partner's intentions deteriorate until they become exclusively negative, no matter what the other person says or does. So I took from that to always to mean to always have an open mind about the other person, even though you're seeing them day in and day out. When they do something, you might just assume that you know why they're doing it, because you do, of course, you do know that person more than any other person in the world, but leave leave an open space to explain themselves, to explain their intention. Um, so that was a really good point. And then they also brought up different love languages. And I'd heard of it before and I hadn't really taken it seriously. But it coming from this book, I re-examined it again, and I think it had really helpful hints there too. And I think it is true too. And I think the last thing was about the unity in marriage, and main part of it being inviting Christ into your marriage through spiritual practices,
Mm.
taking the sacraments together, praying together, reading spiritual books together. And that could be something that you've done when in the engagement period, you know. Um, but make sure that you're still doing it in marriage to in dairasa, or because that is our anchor, just like how we talked about at the beginning, just kind of bringing it all together. um yeah, practicing the fasts together. I think also another thing in the book, they don't shy away from intimacy, which I thought was good. It's a
Mm.
conversation that needs to be had. um And I just wanted to say, I think, because I was just hearing this about the conversation with Galigant, it was another question that was being asked about intimacy and, oh, like, what days are we not allowed to do this versus what days? There are so many rules and that kind of thing. And they did, again, they did strongly advise to talk to your confession father. Again, it always comes back to that. But another point is to not just, to also see it, and one, they offered one perspective, which is you should kind of view it as, okay, what way am I submitting my marriage to God? Um, so I thought it was a good perspective to add to this book. But yeah, overall, I really, really liked it. I think we did bring up some point, like I think those were the only points that we just kind
Yeah.
of been critical of, but everything else is really great. I would recommend it for singles, for people that are engaged, of people that are newlyweds, but and even also people that have been married for a while. I think it's really helpful.
I agree. And just to add to that, two more points is it described, there's a really nice part that it describes it as a little church. So it says, it calls it like houses of prayer, houses of purity, houses of blessing. And there's a part that says marriage is more than human. It's a micro basilia or a miniature kingdom, which is the little house of the Lord. So the spiritual acts like kind of goes aligned with thinking of it as a little church. And I want to make sure I don't kind of stray people away. We've been talking about a lot about like your confession father and making sure they're involved, but there's something in here And it says it's not so that your confession father can make the decision for you, whether it's with this or with anything else. It's not so that they're your deciding person. That's not what we mean. But just making sure that they're aware and they're guiding you from the very beginning of anything. That's what mikra kahan mean. It doesn't mean like decision of a kahan.
Yeah.
It's mikr, right? So being guided by that in a wise way. It's not someone. And I remember one of my first confession father, I think and it says don't take this as an opportunity to kind of rely on someone or as like a crutch. Like they shouldn't be making your decisions for you. Like you have to make that decision because you have a relationship with Christ, right? So I remember with my confession father, I always used to be like, "What do you think? Like, you decide." Because I was just so scared. And it was just like, I remember, and then he would, unless it was something that's like an absolute yes or an absolute like red line, no, this is a hard stop, he never made any decisions for me or never even went that route at all. He would always say, "Oh, yun na natin mo sense judge,"
Yeah.
unless it was like something like really serious. So I do want to just add that caveat because we've been talking a lot about confession fathers. But yes,
Mhm.
overall, I love the book. It was just those two things. I didn't want people to be influenced by that. But overall, it was a really good book and had a lot of good information in it.
Yeah, I also want to emphasize that um, I know we keep talking about like people in relationships, but I really wish I had this book before I even thought about being in a relationship, because it like why else would you not prepare for marriage before even finding somebody? This book talked about you're never going to find the one, like there is no the one, and that will be a huge shock for a lot of people. But until you're in a relationship, that's when you hear it. But why does it get to that point? People that are singles need to learn about this stuff. It's really important because it decreases the amount of frustration later on in the relationship. Like, if your partner messes up and you'd say, literally, your response would be like, this is not the person meant for me. Like, in your heart, that's what you would say, but
Mm.
that's not how it is. And it explains how you find somebody, how you prepare yourself first, how you find somebody, which is a huge thing that people lack the guide of. Like, this is there to tell you how you should be feeling when you find somebody or before you find somebody. It talked about synergy, which is a term I first heard for about the first time, about how it described your will and God's will, and it
Mm.
cooperatively,
Yeah.
um, hand in hand, works together. You can't 100% give it to God, because then if something messes up, then you blame God. So to avoid that type of mistake, and also because we're humans and we make mistakes, completely relying on yourself is outside of what our church teaches. It has to be hand in hand, which was amazing to hear. And I think a lot of people need to learn about that and prepare themselves before they get into the frustration of, like, I'm never going to find the one. I'm learning about all this relationship stuff, but I don't think I can find somebody. It's no, you can. There's a guide now. There's something that, if you have a question about why are we arguing so much, there's literally a chapter on communication for both people in relationship and marriage. And you can take it and learn with your friends as well. Like, it's really a fundamental like advice. Like, I was in awe. Like, it was truly an enjoyable read. And I remember Buchu saying like she wanted to start highlighting stuff, and I was like, "You're gonna highlight the whole book because it's really that good." It
Yeah.
feels like a conversation with the priest and the counselor, and it was incredible because you can see both of their hand in the book.
Absolutely.
You see, the little worldly advice, and like, but that's also important as well. You have to know the dynamic, and then you bring it back to the church, and you have a father telling you how to, you know, take this and understand it and bring it towards more spiritual. And so, yeah, loved this book. Absolutely loved this book. I definitely think I would reread it again and again. I took notes, and it's still like something that you either read by yourself, share it with a partner, and read it with your partner. I mean, one of my favorite parts was in page 142. I don't know if you guys remember. It says Rupert and Cynthia have an argument. I was like, they might as well put me and my fiance's name in there. This
Yeah.
was copy paste, like, and I know there's so many other people that go through the same thing. So yeah, read that if you need to be convinced why you should read this book. But overall, it's incredible how much detail there is. Our church has this, for sure. It's just in Amharic, and the types of books we have. It's not like organized and concise like this is. Like this is a guide, and it shows before, during, and after. So
Not
that's
only that, I think I really loved the discussion questions after each chapter, which makes it really easy to go through with your partner to read it, and then it kind of makes you like it makes you face what you just read and like have to digest it, and then like have to brings you back to reality and like what your situation is with your partner, so you can talk about it and አብራችሁን እንትን እንድትሉ uh to figure out what like how that's like what that looks like in your own marriage. I thought I really loved that part. I forgot to mention it, but yeah. So it's almost like a textbook guide. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, you mentioned synergy, and I think that was like, I can't believe we didn't mention that.
I know.
That's literally one of the most important parts of the book. Good, like, I think when that's the same thing when we 100% you give it to God, right? But that doesn't mean you don't just say like sitting and like waiting for men not to come down and like your fiance to just like fall on your lap. That's not what that means, right? Giving it to God means like you're 100% open and willing and you're submitting your will to his will for you, right? And then being open to that and walking in the path that he wants you to walk on in this path and being part of that, right? Doing your part. So I think that is also a really important part. We 100% need in our hearts to give it to God and always have him as our and I remember I used to say this like I have lots of thoughts and lots of things about okay, who could it be and all, but like please veto my decision at the end. Like I always said that of like if I'm going down a path because I know like he will not force us to do anything. So if I'm like gun ho and like adamant about I'm gonna marry this person and like this is what I'm gonna do and everyone has to listen to me and like God is not gonna be like no like he's not he will let me go to the path that I choose, right? But always saying like please make sure that my choices and my feelings are like aligning with your will and always keeping that communication open with God. And I think that was a huge part for me and it's one thing that I want to add on. As I mentioned it.
that's wonderful. Do you guys have any more last points? Anything? I know we went through a lot. It was a really detailed book. I mean, we barely like we scraped the surface for sure, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of information in it.
Yeah. Can we go read it? Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, may you hear the word of life, my sisters. It was a wonderful discussion. And yeah, we'll hopefully tune in into the next episode.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.